And thanks all for taking some time out tonight. It's going to be a fun hour. And as we're going along here, I do expect that I will get some latecomers, and they'll be sitting in the waiting room. So anyone, feel free, if you do see someone sitting in the waiting room, just knock on my door and let me know. If you could all, again, please try and keep your mics muted until we have the Prospects Q&A, which I think I'm going to try and start around 8:20. And I do have a list of people that have submitted questions. And if you're on the call, I'm going to call you out and you can ask your question. Otherwise, I can do that. And at this point, I think we're going to get started. Do people see the participants list on my screen or just the presentation?
Just the presentation.
Okay, good. Good, thank you. All right, so welcome all to the third annual Prospects 1500 conference. This is very exciting. The first year we did this was in Washington a couple of years ago. Last year we were in Cleveland, always during All-Star Weekend, and in Los Angeles. Didn't happen this year, but I was still excited to put this together, and I think I've actually got more people involved tonight than we would have in LA. But definitely next year, our fingers are crossed for in-person live Atlanta 2021. So welcome all. I'm going to introduce our three special guest panelists in just a moment. Looking at the agenda, we're going to do some prospects questions that I've posed to Jonathan, Emily, and Eric. Some things for us to think about prospects and as we get going here into the shortened season. I've got about a half hour allotted for our special Q&A with the three of them. And then we'll do a wrap up as we get close to 9 o'clock. A couple things I want to mention about what's next for us on our website. And certainly Eric, Emily, and Jonathan, you can let us know what's on tap for each of you here in the 2020 new normal season. So first of all, I'd like to, I'll go forward here. Welcome Jonathan Mayo. Jonathan covers the draft and the minors for MLB.com and MLB Pipeline. He's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You can find him on Twitter at Jonathan Mayo and his website minors.mlbblogs.com. Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. You can ignore that website. I don't think I've blogged anything since we had blogs. So
okay.
It was the Nixon administration, I think it was.
So
Otis Nixon.
Okay, I was going to say early 70s Watergate, not that old.
No.
So thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. It was good seeing you last year in Cleveland. I'm excited to have you on tonight. Emily Walden, national prospect writer at The Athletic. Detroit Tigers minor leagues, also for The Athletic, Detroit, and some contributions to Baseball America. She's a SABR Award winner. Romans 831. She's from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Welcome at Emily C. Walden. How are you tonight?
Doing well. Thank you again for asking me to come on here. I'm excited.
Awesome. I appreciate you spending some time with us. And our third special guest panelist tonight, we have all the way from Maine, USA, the lead MLB and fantasy baseball writer and minor league prospect analyst for Fantrax. In his Portland Sea Dogs face covering, the co-host of 5-Tool Pod, father of two, and FSWA member. He's a huge Jared Kelenic fan, 24/7, 365 baseball. It's Eric Cross, at Eric Cross 04 on Twitter. Eric, how are you tonight?
Doing very well, Scott. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to talking some prospects with everyone and joining Jonathan and Emily on this panel. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. Just checking my participants list and making sure nobody's in the waiting room. So what I have here, everyone that's on board tonight, I posed these questions to Jonathan and Emily and Eric a couple days ago. Maybe they did their homework, maybe they didn't. It's off the cuff. That's totally cool. So these are similar to questions that I've asked our panelists at the last 2 years of these conferences. We've always kind of focused on the futures game because we've done our conference on Futures Game Sunday morning. So since we didn't have that, I tried to tailor these a little bit to the 2020 season. So which players drafted in 2019 last year have made the most progress and are highest on your list right now? I guess this is something that we can pose to the panel, get some thoughts on this question before we move on. I'll start with Eric.
Yeah, so one player that really has impressed me a lot since the draft, CJ Abrams from the Padres. He was already a very high draft pick, but hit the ground running in the Arizona League. It was one of the more impressive prospects out there. Has that blazing speed that everyone loves, a little more power than people give him credit for, and some pretty good contact skills. So he's going to be a guy that, even though he was a prep bat coming in the draft, I think he could be a fairly quick riser for those types of prep bats, and it's very, very exciting. So super excited about him going forward.
Very cool. Jonathan, how about a 2019 draftee that you're really high on?
I mean, could I just go really easy and pick Adley Rutschman? Because he's that – I mean, that seems ridiculous. Well, here's the thing. Can I steal the Tigers pick from you, or do you have, like, dominion over them?
I think I kind of have priority. I'm sorry.
Fine. I will say that before he was a Detroit Tiger, Riley Green was from Florida, which is one of the states that is in my domain for our draft coverage. So, but I will leave him for you. I do like him a lot. And I will, you know what, I won't pick Adley Rutschman because everyone knows who he is. He's really, really good. I would probably just have him, if all things being equal, I'd probably throw him in the big leagues now. But I'm gonna look at Nick Lodolo of the Reds. It was first pitcher taken. He's more of a feel for pitching than pure stuff, but had a really strong debut. He went to summer camp. He's in the Reds alternate camp. Don't ask me what that means for his future because no one knows. But I do think that there was some talk about how he could contribute this year in some kind of piggyback system. He was very impressive this summer. He commands all of this stuff really well. If this had been a normal year, I think this is the kind of guy that starts the year in Double-A and, could help a big league team out late if the Reds were a team that could have competed. Now, I don't think they were thought to be that kind of team necessarily. In a normal spring, they do have some offense and they do need pitching. I don't think we'll see him this year, but I think he should be ready for opening day 2021, which I believe will happen in April 2022.
Okay. Thanks. Good insight there on our next possible season. And Emily, who's your Tiger, I guess?
Yeah, I know that's kind of a tricky one. Jonathan sort of paved the way for that one, but I think one of the most interesting pieces for me, because I hadn't seen Riley prior to getting drafted, just seen a lot of video, talked to a lot of scouts. And the big thing that came up about him very early on was his power, natural raw power, especially for being as young as he was. But the part that really kind of jumped out to me once I got to see him live is how incredibly strong he was defensively. I mean, not quite a Derek Hill, for those of you guys who are familiar with Derek Hill, not quite that flashy of a defensive style, but extremely aggressive. I think he has a lot of confidence in his body, a lot of really solid tools on both sides of the ball, and just the maturity. I mean, this kid is so mature. He's actually still 19 for people who don't realize that. So the fact that he jumped that many affiliates in a single season, still put on the type of performance he did in the Midwest League, definitely someone who impressed a lot of people.
All right. I appreciate you guys answering that question. The next one we've got here looks like which players drafted last year could have been in the Futures game this year had it been played, or could be in next year's Futures game. And I'll piggyback that with, can you see any of this year's recent 2020 draftees in next year's Futures game? So basically, next year, who could we see in the Futures game? Jonathan, why don't you start off with this one?
I'm going to start every answer by asking if it's okay to talk about Adley Rutschman. But I won't. I will not talk about Adley Rutschman. I will say that if Adley Rutschman isn't in the next Futures game, we'll miss having him in the next Futures game. I think what I'm going to do, I'm cherry picking guys from the top of last year's draft, but I've already forgotten. No, I forgot, Scott, what the question was from. Guys from last year's draft or anybody for this year's?
Yeah, last year's draft or this year's draft that we could see at the Futures game in Atlanta. So young prospects.
Yeah, right. Because I know they're Jared Kelnick fans, but I think he may be in the big leagues, so forget that. I'm going to say for next year, then I'll pick Bobby Witt Jr., who again seems slightly ridiculous picking the number 2 pick in last year's draft, but his, like Emily said about Riley Green, start sort of with his maturity and just his feel for his own body, which he's had since he was 16. The thing that's amazing about Riley Green is that there were questions about his defense entering his senior year. Then he completely retooled his body, and in the spring was a different human being, and questions about his athleticism went out the window. Bobby Witt Jr. has been the best shortstop in his class since kindergarten, and he's a no doubt about it shortstop. But what I love about him, and he was like this when he played, for Team USA in international competition. If there was another shortstop, he would happily move to second or to third. I think he would probably be happy to play center if you asked him to. He just wants to be on a baseball field and help a team win, period. And for a guy who is that confident in his ability, but also just has a passion for the game, he'd be the kind of guy I'd want to see on that stage early. And even if that means having him a couple of times, that would be great. I don't think it's going to take him that long, by the way. I think he's going to be one of those high school kids who does start moving quickly. But I'll tell a quick Bobby Witt story that I heard from someone. The Royals, he's playing an instructional league, which, for the Royals is in Arizona. And so, of course, it's, 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And everyone's kind of dragging, it's instructional league play, or maybe it was an AZL game. And everyone's dragging, and he makes the last out of an inning, sprints into the dugout, is the first guy to hit, and for 9 innings. And I kept watching him thinking, all right, eventually he's going to kind of play every inning. This is all he wants to do is play baseball. And then you add in the fact that he's a legitimate 5-tool guy at a premium position. The Royals were kind of in a good position in last year's draft because as good as Adley Rutschman is, and he was the guy to take number 1, I don't think the Royals suffered at all by taking Witt number 2. They were happy to have the Orioles kind of make the decision for them.
Great story. Awesome. Yeah. Bobby Witt Jr., a lot of us really, really high on him. Emily, let's pose that question to you. A 2019 or 2020 draftee, you think we could see at next year's Futures game?
Can't pick Riley Green again.
Well, the funny thing for me, obviously covering primarily the Tigers system as well as the national level, the Tigers have picked so high in the draft. A lot of the top picks have gone to Detroit. So it's given me a little bit of that early exposure to them. I'm going to go off the Tigers path, as tempting as that is, and say JJ Blede. I think the reason being is how well he adjusted to his first assignment. Coming right out of college, even if you're a bit of a big name on the college scene, which he was with Vanderbilt, there's still a lot of pressure. You realize very quickly how different that minor league field is compared to the college scene, with a guy like Alex Faedo, who was so impressive in college, really struggled when he got to the minors and had to sort of rediscover himself. And a guy like JJ Blede, obviously a lot of skill at the plate, a lot of athleticism. And I think hitting about 250 in high A in his first assignment, pretty impressive if you consider how much pressure that is for a guy brand new to the minor league level. I think we're going to see more maturity from him as his body continues to develop, sort of discover its identity as a minor leaguer away from Vanderbilt. I think we're going to see some good stuff from him, and he should move pretty quickly. And as tempting as it was to talk about Spencer Torkelson, I decided to shift off that a little bit.
All right. Well, he could be there. I know I've got to give a shout out to my Prospects 1500 Florida writers, Stauffer Cochran and Bailey Srebnick. They love that Marlins Blede pick from you right there. And Eric, let's go over to you for your pick, 2019 or 2020 draftee that we could see in Atlanta at the Futures game, fingers crossed, next summer.
Yeah, so I'll go to the 2020 draft and a guy that I'm incredibly high on, prep bat out of Florida, Zach Veen, went number 9 overall to the Colorado Rockies. And he might have some of the best all-around tools in this 2020 draft class. Obviously, Torkelson, he's going to be a monster. There's no doubt about that. But, people have seen, the Bellinger comps thrown around for Zach Veen, which is incredibly lofty. But you can kind of see it, just when you look at Veen play. Got the bat speed from the left side, swing path nice through the zone with some natural loft, ton of raw power. I can see him getting up to, pushing double plus raw power. Contact skills are pretty solid as well. So I don't think he's going to be, just a power only guy. Very good barrel control for his age. Like I said, the bat speed is exceptional. Don't think he's going to stay up the middle. He's played some up the middle and center field. I think he's more of a right fielder long term, but definitely one that can be a force at the plate. Everyone likes to make fun of how the Rockies have handled prospects lately and how guys like Garrett Hampson and others, Brendan Rodgers, have had a tough time cracking the lineup. But don't let that ding you or make you shy away from Zach Veen. He's still a few years away, so he's got plenty of time to develop. Upside is off the charts with this kid. The makeup is off the charts as well. Everything you hear about him is just very positive. His makeup and work ethic and just who he is as a teammate and a person. So I always like to hear that as well. Just the all-around package. I'm very excited to see what Zach Veen can do over the next year or two.
All right. Thank you. Eric, while I've got you right here, I'm going to skip over this next question for now. We might get back to it a little later, but I know since you're doing a lot of writing with Fantrax, Dynasty, fantasy baseball leagues is your thing. I want to pose this question to you, and certainly Emily and Jonathan, you're welcome to jump in, but a lot of the people on the call are into Dynasty leagues and whatnot. So what is your favorite type of Dynasty fantasy baseball league format and why? Thinking about all the different things like settings, roster size, minor league prospect rosters and whatnot, your favorite format and why?
Honestly, the deeper the better. You can really, when you really get down to the nitty gritty of the minor leagues and get to the, the names that not everybody might know, anybody can, assemble a minor league roster for a dynasty league with all the elite guys, the top 100, top 200 guys. But when, I've been on a few different, 30 team, 50 plus, on your roster players. So you're getting down, 1,000 plus deep into the minor leagues. So you really got to do your homework. It's really challenging, but you got to love it because, like I said, you can get down to the guys that nobody might know about. You can get some of the breakouts, all the J2 guys. There's always some upside there that pans out. So I definitely like doing the deeper rosters, deeper league, a lot more challenging. It's no fun when the same person wins, 3 out of 4 years. So if you get like a 30 team league, you got some nice competition. You get some turnover, almost kind of like real kind of major league setting. So that's what I would do. Definitely deeper, and I prefer roto over head to head. I've seen plenty of times. So a team cruises through the regular season, gets into the playoffs and head to head, and just has a bad week. Pitchers get hurt, whatever. Players slump, and then you're out of it. And you had the best team in the league. So roto is a good way to counteract that. The playoffs can be fun. Some down to the wire matchups in the playoffs, but yeah, I'd prefer roto and then deeper format as well.
Sounds good. Thank you. Emily, Jonathan, I didn't know if your involvements with fantasy or dynasty leagues, I knew Eric had to pipe in on that one, but figured seeing the shaking of the head. So that's totally cool. Before we get to the moving on to the Prospects Q&A half hour that I've got set up, the last question was, basically, I'm going to give you the floor here. This is very simple. What prospects do we need to know about right now? Like if you could give us, 1 or 2 names, might be off the radar, who do we need to know about? Because all these questions I've got from people lined up, they're going to kind of, go all over the place. But this is your chance to wow us. Jonathan, why don't you go first?
Oh, man, really?
Yep.
Not
Adley Rushman.
This crowd, what even constitutes off the radar?
Well, maybe a guy that's not in your top 100, but could be a year
All
from
right. Okay. So I'm gonna throw out two, and I'm gonna sort of tie together, one of the other questions that you had sent originally, which is in terms of guys who stood out this summer. And like we'll have a new top 100 out, but we're not re-ranking. We're just gonna put in the draft guys because for us there wasn't enough to see. But one guy that does come to mind is Jose Garcia, the shortstop with the Reds, who got a chance to really impress big league brass, largely because the Reds don't really have they don't have much in the way of shortstops. When your big league team is looking at Kyle Farmer to play a lot of shortstop, something is not going well. But he is a legitimate shortstop. He can also handle second. He's added some strength, so he's swinging the bat much better. So he's a guy that, if we were going to really shuffle the top 100, he might slide into the top 100. And then the other guy that I think I'll mention, and I just want to make sure, and it's another guy was in summer camp, and not a guy who's going to be in the big leagues this year, but was given a chance to show what he could do, is Liover Peguero with the Pirates. He came from the Diamondbacks in the Starling Marte trade, and he really intrigues me. He's kind of far off. He hasn't played in full season ball yet, but he can really, really hit and run. Another guy who has a chance to stay at shortstop. Now, he could outgrow it a little bit, and if that happens, I think he's going to hit enough to play third, or could be a really, really good second baseman. But the bat is really interesting to me, and that's a guy who's like not quite top 100. I was very excited to see what he was going to do this year, and then of course, obviously, that didn't happen.
Yeah. All right. Two good names there with Peguero and Garcia. No, my Prospects 1500 staff a lot of them are big fans of Garcia. Emily, how about one or two players not in your top 100 or so, but could be by this time next year?
Yeah, as far as the ones who really kind of grabbed my attention, I think that I don't personally do a top 100, but a few that I got some exposure to last year in person for the first time, which I always try to give those types of reports from a personal perspective and not so much off of video if I'm able to. Someone who I saw a lot of last year is Braylon Marquez with the Cubs. And for me, I think the thing that really grabbed me about him is what a live arm he has, for one. Triple-digit fastball, still really young, but the fact that he's not just a big arm, you can see that the pieces are kind of coming together. He's a smart kid, and I think that's a big factor for those big fastball arms, is that, okay, you can throw 103, but are you actually going to hit the mitt, or are you going to take out the batter unintentionally because you have no control to work with? And I think with Braylon, there's enough of a maturity there where he's sort of starting to figure himself out, which is a great place to do in the Midwest League because you see some pretty advanced hitting. And so for a guy like that to be able to get that type of exposure, you're seeing him also realize, okay, this is what I'm capable of. These are my strengths, and sort of discovering himself to where he'll have a better sense of that once he gets back into regular season play. And then I think the other one who had a little bit of a transition is Matthew Libertore, who went to St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
He was part of that strong Rays pipeline of pitching. And for me, the thing with him, again, is just that maturity. I know I use that word maturity a lot, but for these younger guys who, we see at the minor league level, it's a huge responsibility and it's a huge amount of pressure for these guys to figure it out at 18, 19, 20 years old and be able to still carry on that same sense of productivity and be able to really utilize their bodies to the most value. And with Matthew Libertore, watched him a lot when he was still with Bowling Green, and just a very, very healthy, mature mix that he's been able to develop. Still very young again, really matured a lot last year. So I'm excited to see what St. Louis does with him as far as making the most out of what he brings to the table. And I think he's got a really, really big future ahead of him.
Awesome. So Emily goes with Libertore and Marquez. Eric Cross, pose this to you. 2 names, maybe not in your top 100 right now, but could be next year.
Love the Libertore pick there, Emily. Very high on him as well. I'm gonna kind of piggyback off Emily here and go with a guy I saw live a ton last year in Double-A Portland, my neck of the woods up here in Maine. That's Bobby Dahlback from the Red Sox. Doesn't really get, he gets some love obviously, but this could be a legit, 30 to 40 homer bat at the major league level, especially when you add in, that his future home park is going to be Fenway. His kind of swing is geared for power at Fenway. A lot of extra base hits because a very strong kid. I say kid, he's like 24 now, but very strong, especially through the lower half, gets good torque in his swing through the hips, pulls the ball a lot. He can go the opposite way, but a lot of his power, is that pulls out and he elevates very well. So, you hit the ball hard in the air to left field at Fenway Park. That usually means, shots in the monster, off the monster, a lot of doubles, home runs there. I think his swing is just tailor-made for Fenway Park. Probably will never hit for a super high average, but does walk a ton, has a good eye. So I think he'll be able to get on base and, enough. Probably a guy you slot in 5th, 6th in the order, something like that to stretch the lineup behind guys like Bogarts and Devers and JD Martinez. Would be very good compliment there. So really excited to see what he can do, whether it's at third base, first base, DH, who knows, probably more so first base and DH with all the options the Red Sox have. But they'll get that bat in the lineup maybe even later this year or at the latest probably next year. And then for a pitcher, a guy I like, I had not seen him live yet. I wish I had, but guy from the 2019 draft class, that's Blake Walston of the Arizona Diamondbacks, picked near the end of the first round. This kid just screams projection. He's still only 18, maybe he's 19 now. 6'5", ton of projection left on that frame. Can already get up into low 90s, touch, 94, 95 with that fastball. You got to figure that some bulk will be added there, add a few ticks to that fastball. Already shown a very good curveball that you could probably grade as plus as well. And you see, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the arsenal kind of pans out. He's got to change up as well, which is, it's at least looks like it might be an average offering. We'll see how that develops. Very good poise for his age, very good command for, a kid that age, more advanced than most 18, 19-year-old pitchers that you see. So very excited to see, what he can do in that system. There's a lot of pitching in that system in Arizona. And they added 2 more, this draft with Slade Sakani and Bryce Jarvis. So there's just a ton of pitching, and he might be the best one. So really excited to see what he can do over the next couple of years once he really can get into, full season ball, hopefully next year.
All right. That was pretty good. I really appreciate the 3 of you addressing those questions. Really some good things for all of us that are prospects lovers, watchers, dynasty leaguers to think about. This is the time a lot of us have been excited for and waiting for. It's the Q&A. So I've got the next 20, 25 minutes or so set aside. We have some questions that have previously been submitted on Twitter. We have others that we'll get to ask here live and in person. I'm going to call out some people that I know are on the call. I've seen them in the list of participants. I'm going to go to them first, see if we can get through those. And then I do have some other questions that are lined up in case those folks are not on the call. So I'm going to start with my Oakland A's correspondent right here on Prospects 1500, Jared Chapman at Chappie is Clutch on Twitter. Jared, I think you've got a question about Mr. Javier on the Astros.
I do, and it's probably a little sacrilege for the Oakland writer to ask about the Houston guy, but this is a guy that I've been in all my dynasty leagues for years, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about what went down last night and if it changed any of your thoughts about Javier. A lot of reviews on him have been mixed, and I'm just curious what you guys think after last night.
Eric, you want to jump in on Christian Javier first?
Yeah, if I can unmute my mic, there we go. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, no, Javier was impressive. Eno Saros was talking about him on the latest Rates and Barrels podcast that his changeup and his slider, which tunnel very well off of each other, they have 18 inches of horizontal difference in break. Obviously, the changeup going one way and the slider the other way. So those are both two very good secondaries to start with. You know, the fastball, I'm not as sold on. I think he was averaging right around like 92.5. Does have some good run on it though. But he's a guy, you know, everyone looks to Forrest Whitley in that system, or even Jose Urquidy after his performance in the World Series. But Javier could be a very solid arm for them. Guy that strikes out a lot of batters. It'll be really up to that fastball. If he can continue to gain some velocity there, and that command too. His command has been kind of inconsistent throughout his professional career. So if he can really up that command, I think he could be a solid arm for that Houston team.
Thank you. And you know what, Emily, Jonathan, Eric, it's not like all three of you need to answer every question. So if anyone who does ask, wants to specify who the question's going for, that might help us get some more questions in. But certainly, Emily and Jonathan, if there's anything you want to add about Christian Javier, that would be great.
I mean, I think quickly the biggest thing for him long term is command, and that's going to determine what his ultimate role is going to be. And he doesn't have, Eric mentioned the lack of fastball. The weird thing is that he's one of these guys that because of deception and spin, people don't barrel up that fastball. But you don't look at him and think, oh well, if you shorten him up, he's going to pitch high leverage innings necessarily because of that. I give him every chance to start now. What he did yesterday was very impressive, but I would not, like with any one person, in one start, I'm not going to, put all my eggs in that basket just because he threw well yesterday. I think it earns him some more time. And the Astros right now, I think last I checked, they've got like 9 rookies on their pitching staff. Almost all in the bullpen. It's kind of insane. And Forrest Whitley isn't one of them. But I think with Javier, it's going to be a question of if he can find the strike zone and command the baseball as well as he did yesterday, then we've got a very good, solid mid-rotation starting pitcher on our hands. But what has he got? About a 4.7 walk rate in his minor league career. I need to be convinced still.
All right, Emily, if you want to add anything, or I can move on to the next question we've got here. All right. I know someone who.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I know someone who popped on just recently is a big Giants fan, writer, covers the Giants minor leagues. Roger Munter. Roger, you're on, and I think you've got a question that you wanted to ask.
Oh, thanks, Scott. Sure. So my question is basically how 2020 is going to impact timelines for how we think about prospects going forward. And since I am a Giants fan, I'll use Marco Luciano as the example here. Having only spent now a year in rookie league, where do we anticipate he starts next year? He's in the 60-man pool. Is that equivalent to having spent a year of A ball? Does he jump to A plus? And then what happens to the guys who aren't in the pools at all, who are just sort of out there figuring it out on their own? Are they just back where they were in 2019 going forward, and everybody loses a year in their development?
Am I good to run on this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
I will say, just because I haven't had as much exposure to that system particularly, I will comment more on the player development side of things. I worked with, Saris on more or less breaking down the nightmare that is player development in 2020, because you have such strict guidelines on a team-by-team basis of how they're developing these guys, the timelines that have been put together. And 2020 just sort of threw all that out the window. Now you've got guys playing indie ball and pay-to-play leagues, and you've got guys who are still stuck at home quarantining because of things that are going on. So I think what we're going to see in 2021, fingers crossed, knock on wood, I think we're going to see teams who have a really deep sense of faith in their development staff, in their scouts, in their roving instructors, because at this point you don't have a choice. You can't hold guys back if they're ready to move forward, because that's just going to do them harm. You need to keep challenges in front of them. And so for teams who are able to look at kind of the success from the year before, weighing that against how the guys did during the offseason, their health, there's a lot of different factors, but I think we're going to see a lot of those teams to say, you know what, we trust our guys, we trust their opinions, So we're going to try to be a little bit more aggressive in 2021. And I think you're going to see some of these guys move pretty aggressively because the teams understand we've lost some time here. So to keep them sharp, we've got to put some challenges in front of them.
Great answer. Thank you. Jonathan, anything you'd like to add on Marco Luciano?
So I'll start by saying that I think Marco Luciano is an exception to the rule. He's kind of one of these guys that's a little bit of a freak, and I think you could probably push him. And I think for him and others like him, the younger guys who are put in these pools, some of it's going to come down to how many reps they get. Yes, they're getting unusual experience because they're around much older and more advanced players, but they're not playing in actual competition. So, you know, and he's so super young that I could see the Giants deciding to start him in low A and then move him quickly, you know, if they wanted to, and then let his performance dictate. But if, you know, it's enough reps now, there's some sort of instructional super Arizona league, something or other, where you can get even more at-bats, then maybe you're talking about that replicating a full year of development time. I mean, he's so young that they could be a little cautious, and he's still going to be ahead of the learning curve, right? You know, he'll be 19. He could start in low A and end up in double A by the end of the 2021 season. I think in a general sense, there are a couple of things that we just don't know the answers to. One, we don't know how many levels of minor league baseball there are going to be. So if there are no short season teams, which we all know Major League Baseball seems to want, then you've got a flush of talent pushing competition that could force the Marco Luciano up a rung, that could make that decision. Just because, well, he's got to play every day, but we've got a guy behind him we also want to play every day. I don't think a team is going to move an elite level athlete just because of that, but I think that's part of the equation. Then when you talk about sort of additions of talent to a system, there were only 5 rounds of a draft. There are no real international signings yet. That's been pushed forward. We'll have to see. Those guys will likely spend a year in the Dominican or Venezuelan summer leagues, assuming that those exist, you know, a year from now. So that, you know, there just hasn't been as much talent to push up against that to create. So it's almost 2 separate things that are fighting against each other. And we're just going to have to see how it plays out in terms of what teams do with the personnel they have and the affiliates they have to send them to.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Great point there about possibly without the short season affiliates next year. Eric, anything about Marco? I know you're a big fan of Marco. And then I've got the next question on deck. On deck, Mr. Jim Zealy.
Yeah, no, I don't get really anything to add in terms of, you know, timeline. Emily and Jonathan hit on basically everything. Luciano, he's one I'm super excited about. Another AZL standout, very advanced for his age, tons of raw power. You know, whether, you know, he stays at shortstop or moves to, you know, out to left field or something like that remains to be seen. But in terms of the offensive potential, it's you know, the sky's the limit with this kid. So I would love to see San Fran push him, especially because their AA affiliate is in the Eastern League. So I'd get to see him sooner. So that'd be a little, you know, good thing for me. But yeah, definitely excited about Luciano, especially the offensive ceiling that he possesses. So I love seeing teams push prospects, especially if they've shown, you know, the ability to, you know, go to that next level. I love seeing teams a little bit, see if they can handle the challenge of the next level up. So yeah, very excited about Luciano.
Sounds good. All right. Next question. My Cleveland Indians correspondent for the website, Jim Zealy, wanted to ask about a duel between Ethan Hankins and Daniel Espino. So, Jim, maybe you want to
first off,
add to that?
Yeah, thank you all three of you guys for joining us tonight. My question, like Scott said, as far as Ethan Hankins and Daniel Espino, Emily might direct this to you first because you've seen them a little bit more in person. But how do we see their development going forward over the next couple of years, and what do we see their roles in Cleveland when they reach the big leagues?
Yeah, I actually haven't gotten the chance to see Espino yet in person. I'm hoping to. Well, we were all hoping for a lot in 2020. Obviously, that didn't quite work out. But with Hankins specifically, I think for him, the next year or two is really going to tell a lot about what his future looks like. I saw him a lot in the Midwest League. You see a lot of the tools there, but at the same time, they're still kind of rough around the edges. I talked to a few scouts and they said, I like what he could be if all of this stuff sort of finds its way to come together. So they're all fans of the tools that are there, but I think it's taken him a little bit of time to find the best way to make all of those work. And so right now, I'm still a little bit torn on what his role is specifically, just from what I've seen, because it really wasn't the sharpest that I had heard him performing in the past. And as far as Espino goes, I'm so excited about him. I remember watching some different footage of him prior to the draft and thought the biggest thing about him is there's so many ingredients there to work with. And I think this falls back to what can Cleveland do? What are they able to pull out of him? What is their development staff able to pull out of him? So he's somebody I'll be watching very closely for sure.
All right, thank you. Next question, I'm going to go out to one of our followers on Twitter, Sam Magnuson. Sam, I know you had submitted a question. If you're on, would you like to pose that to one of our guest panelists?
Yes, thank you. So my question is kind of a follow-up to what you guys just were talking about, but it's a little more specific. Any of them can answer, maybe Eric from a fantasy perspective, and either Jonathan or Emily from just general prospects perspective. How are you guys going to be valuing prospects going into the 2021 season, given that there is not a minor league season this year? Like, what does the rankings look like? How do you evaluate what's going on this year with only a few prospects, really elite ones, in the alternate site 60-man roster camps? And then related to the J2 signings, how are you guys going to be evaluating them, since there's going to be a delay and they likely won't be signed until January?
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, that's really tough because, kind of like Jonathan mentioned, you can't really change the rankings up too much because, there's no minor leagues going on, unfortunately. With the J2 guys, there's obviously going to be that huge delay. Usually when they're signed in July, they don't usually debut until the next summer when they get to the DSL. It's very rare you see someone debut that same season where they were when they were signed. So now we have to wait. They're not going to be signed until January now. Obviously, so they're going to wait. Not going to see them until about a year from now. So at that point, they'll be 17, 18, a little bit behind the developmental curve. So even if they're not playing yet, in game action, at least they're in the system, using all that resources. So you got to kind of throw some cold water on, on at least those guys, even if they might be, very toolsy, if we see like Luciano's, the guys like that, very toolsy, high upside, but, they'll be a year behind. So I'm kind of throwing a little cold water, maybe, just temper expectation on those types of prospects for now, just because, like I said, there's no season this year and they're going to be a year behind in their development.
Jonathan, would you like to add anything about that? It's a good kind of deep question considering we don't have any minor league ball this year.
Right. It's, Eric, I think hit it on the head, but it's, it's really tough to figure out. The only thing is that all 30 teams are in the same exact boat, so I think the teams that can find ways to come close to simulating competition are the teams that are going to you're going to see those prospects take a step forward. Well, until they're on the field, we're not really going to know. We may get some reports from the alternate camp, guys looking really good. We're going to hear about every Jared Kelnick homer, like the top guys we're going to know about. But we're not necessarily going to know how O'Neal Cruz looks at shortstop. I'm picking that from my own backyard, and O'Neal Cruz is still perhaps the most fascinating prospect ever. And I believe he's now officially 7'3". I wish I had a definitive, like, this is what it's going to look like, but we're all kind of flying blind a little bit now. And, you know, scouts and people in player development, at least the people in player development can work with some of the players. The vast majority of the players are at home. So you're relying, you know, sort of like when you send them home for the off season, hoping that they stick to their program, and they've all been given different programs now, but you don't know, you can't really check in with them. You know, especially Florida and Arizona are particularly problematic from a coronavirus standpoint. So, like, you know, I'm adding more question marks to the question than anything else. We're going to have to see how these players come out and play. I mean, that's why we're not going to re-rank our top 100 based on, well, a guy looked kind of good in summer camp, or I heard a report that in alternate camp this guy is throwing well. You know, that sort of thing. It's really going to be next year. And don't even get me started about trying to figure out the 2021 draft class. That's a whole nother conversation that I'm at a total loss at.
All right. Thanks. I'm going to move on so we can try and get a few more questions in here. We've got about another 15 minutes before we wrap up. I'm going to throw this over to Mr. Silas Dust. Silas, one of my Diamond Duo's Dynasty league mates, he's got a question I guess he could pretty much pose to anyone. Silas, floor is yours.
Excellent. Hey, I appreciate the opportunity, Scott. Hey, sometimes I think it's fun to look at prospects from a potential only standpoint or purely upside. So take away the floor and look at only the ceiling. What prospects would you see make the biggest jump on your list?
Emily, let's start with you.
Well, again, for my stance, as far as the rankings that I do, I've primarily only done the top names for the Tigers on the ranking scale. So I think I'll go with what I tend to have more experience in that regard. I think somebody that we are going to see really good adjustment from on a performance standpoint as far as how you're handling the adaptation to new levels, I think is Tarek Skubal with the Tigers system. And for those of you who don't know him, he absolutely blasted the Eastern League out of the water last year. His numbers, I actually joked with him about it. I said, did you drink something new? Did you change your diet? And he just kind of cracked up, because for him, he just found that groove, and he was able to really realize the fact that he is completely healthy. He trusts his body. He's a former Tommy John guy. So it takes some of those guys a little bit to really trust that they're at full strength. Sometimes there's some hesitation there. He was able to get into that routine. We saw how effective it was. And then another one that I think I'm going to double back to is Riley Green, somebody who I think we're going to see really grow into his next level of production now that he's had a chance to get some exposure in the minors. You know, granted, it wasn't the longest bit of exposure, but we saw how well he played. When you impress Miguel Cabrera, there's definitely something there, and that's what Riley was able to do. So from a Tigers perspective, I think those are two guys that are really going to see some quick progress.
Awesome. Eric, I'm going to throw it to you, and then I've got another question for Jonathan.
Yeah, no, Skubal, his first start was at Portland, and I believe he went 5 innings, 1 hit, no runs, like 12 strikeouts, something ridiculous. I think what was his K rate, like 18 point something?
I think it was like 17.4.
Yeah, there you go.
Eastern League, which, what the heck?
Like it was already at like 13, 14, and then it went up. It's crazy. Love Skubal. I'll give one hitter, one pitcher real quick. Start with a pitcher, a guy I talked to a couple of months ago, kind of back when quarantine was really starting to ramp up mid to late March. That's Shane Baz of the Tampa Bay Rays. This kid, he has his head. I wanted to move him like 20 spots up my rankings just after talking to this guy. Has his head on straight, really trusts the developmental team they have there in Tampa Bay. Obviously, his stuff is off the charts. That fastball is electric. I saw him out at the Arizona Fall League as well, pitched in the Fall Stars game, hit like 102. Was throwing like 92-mile-an-hour sliders, which is almost unfair. He said he's got a curveball in his back pocket he's working on. We'll see if he breaks that out. So yeah, all the stuff is there, but obviously he's had a hard time staying on the mound consistently. some command and control issues there, but kind of all the pieces are there that if he can put it together, it's gonna be a very electric arm for the Rays. He might even be the best young arm they have in their system right now. That's saying something with guys like McKay and McClanahan, and can't forget Brent Honeywell as well. And then for a hitter going out to the West Coast, a guy that I couldn't get out here without talking about Mlb Marte. Everyone's gushing about Jarred Kelenic, with me included, and Julio Rodriguez, rightfully so. This guy, in terms of just an upside perspective, he's still only down in rookie ball, but the power, the speed, is just off the charts with this guy. We talk about legit 30-30 aspirations. He's the guy, obviously that's very, very lofty, but he's a guy that should be in that conversation at least. We'll see how the hit tool develops, if he can make enough contact to tap into that power and speed, and likely won't be at shortstop because he's very rough around the edges at shortstop. We'll see how Seattle wants to develop him there, move him off the third if he outgrows it, or maybe to a corner outfield spot. But in terms of pure upside, the upside for Marte is off the charts, and people might be talking about him, a year or two from now if they're talking about Kelenic and Rodriguez now.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Emily. Jonathan, this question is from @PJPizzaman1 on Twitter. How about that? And his question is, with the unlikely call-up of Adley Rutschman, would the Orioles consider sending him to winter ball should the virus get under control?
What winter ball?
That's the question.
No, I don't think Adley Rutschman's going to go anywhere. I think that you let him get as many, whatever reps in the alternate camp as he can get. If they're able to do some sort of fall league on steroids, which I'm dubious about, but they were talking about, then yes, I would send him there. And then you send him to Double-A to start next year. And he'll move quickly from there. But I wouldn't, the thing is right now they're in this workout intra-squads mode, then to send them to the Dominican Winter League where it's win at all costs. That's like kind of asking him to ratchet it up awfully quickly. It's not that he couldn't handle it. I just don't know that there would be a net gain from a developmental standpoint to do that. And there's no chance that he will be called up to Baltimore this year.
Okay. A couple more, and then we're going to try and do a wrap up here. Fabian, I know you're on the call, Fabian. You had a question that you submitted about the Marlins. Would you like to pose that to the panel?
Sure.
It was about Sanchez and Blede.
Oh, yes, yeah. Essentially, it's just how soon could those guys, like for example, like Sanchez, Max, and Blede make an impact for an organization that it's probably going to need it pretty soon.
And Fabian, thanks for the question. I know you're calling in from outside the United States, so thank you for
yes.
joining us tonight.
Yeah. Glad I got good enough Wi-Fi today here in Venezuela.
That's all right. From Venezuela. Awesome. So
yes, yep.
Any of you guys want to answer that about Sanchez, Blede, and the other high-profile Marlins? When can they help out? Is it like this week? Because
yeah, well, I was going to say, at the rate the Marlins are going, it's tomorrow. How quickly can they join whenever it is they're going to play baseball for the Marlins again? In all seriousness, like, I think Sanchez would have been, in a normal season, would have been ready to contribute this year. Could he? I think it would be more of a situation that if miraculously the Marlins were competing, then Sanchez could come up, and I would love to see him come out of a bullpen just for like a month, kind of like a David Price with the Rays kind of deal. I still believe in him as a starter, although I think he needs to prove some durability. But I would just love to see that happen, and because his stuff would tick up and it would be absolutely ridiculous. And I think J.J. Blede, isn't that far off from being able to handle big league pitching, at least initially, and then he'd have to show adjustments, and he's always been able to show that he can adjust. So, again, under normal circumstances, if you were to play a year this year, then I would have thought some point next year. He's that kind of advanced college hitter. I think that's a big reason why the Marlins liked him so much. So I think that there's still a chance that he could be ready to contribute at some point in 2021, assuming he's getting some reps now and 2021 looks like a normal baseball season.
Okay. I've got one more question here, and I'm going to put that out to Chuck Schneider. Chuck, I see that you're on the call. I think this would be a perfect question for Emily.
Yes, Emily, glad for all your insight today. How about Matt Manning? Are we going to see him this year?
You're speaking my language, Chuck. With Manning, yes, I think we will see him this year. And I think everything that Eric and Jonathan and myself say has a massive asterisk next to it when we say this year, because none of us really know how long this year is going to go. But with Manning, he has always been my favorite arm in the organization since he signed. I remember seeing him for the first time in the GCL. And the biggest thing that's always stood out to me is how well he understands his body. He is tall. He's 6'6". Obviously, his dad has that NBA pedigree, so he had the height coming in the family genes. But one of the biggest things about that is that he has had such poise since his high school days of pitching. He's been able to really control his body, showed some similarities to Justin Verlander's composure when Justin's at full health. And so for the fact that he's handled all of his moves up the ladder so effectively, he's stayed quite healthy with outside of a couple of road bumps throughout the years. He's stayed quite healthy. And I think the fact that he handles pressure so well, I think if the Tigers do dip into stockpiling some more arms, depending on how deep they get into the season, I think Manning is the go-to. I've spoken with their pitching coordinators and all of the coaches. They all believe he's up for the challenge. So it wouldn't surprise me one bit if he gets that call for Detroit.
I definitely agree on that as well. Manning is a guy, I saw him and Mize back-to-back in Hartford, Connecticut, down your neck of the woods. I met up with you too, Scotty, there in one of those games, I believe. And I was so impressed with Matt Manning. That was one of the more impressive starts I've ever seen live. The curveball obviously is a huge hammer, but what really is taking him from like a very good prospect with upside to one of the top pitching prospects in the game is the development of that changeup, the development of that fastball command. Not only is he throwing 96, 97, 98, he's been able to command it a lot better over the last year or two, which is really when his ascension started. And that changeup, when he can, get a feel for it, that changeup can be nasty as well. Everyone talks about that fastball curveball, but that changeup is very good as well. A little more consistency there, and I agree. He's probably going to be up some point this year, and I'm so excited for this kid long term, as I am with Mize and Manning. That and Fayedo, there's so many arms in that Detroit system. You can go on and on. We could talk about an hour on just Detroit pitching prospects. We really could, especially with Emily on this call. But yeah, Manning, absolutely love this kid.
All right, so this has been a wonderful Q&A. Thank you all. As we get into the wrap up here, I wanted to just mention that some things coming up on Prospects 1500 over the next month or so. We're continuing our 10 names you need to know for each organization, not necessarily top 10 prospects per team, but names that we all want to watch throughout the organization. We're going to have continued coverage from each team correspondent, league correspondent, and my cohort in crime, Jake Berry, starting next Monday, is going to start up our prospects of the week. No minor league action, but we're going to be looking at the prospects that are getting some major league playing time. Jake, you're on the call. Any quick comments you want to mention about that?
No, Scott, I'm just super excited you were on board for that. And, this is kind of questionable times right now, but I'm excited that some of these young guys are getting some playing time. I'm looking forward to doing some prospects of the week with you. Awesome.
Yeah, and I'll definitely be helping you with that. And then our Prospects 1500 overall top 150 or even more, could be closer to 200, will come out later this fall. What we do is each of my writers submit their own top 100s, and then we aggregate all the points and we come up with a nice overall listing for the site. And Jake and I will be working on more episodes of our Futures Focus podcast, which we have a lot of fun on. Jonathan was one of our first guests back when we launched that last year. Before we say goodbye and hopefully see everyone in 2021, hopefully next year, who's in for that, I do want to just give Jonathan, Emily, and Eric the floor just for another minute here. Let us know what's coming up for you guys. We've got a very intriguing shortened MLB season, no minor league ball, but what can we expect from you? Eric, why don't you start?
Yeah, so usually in a normal season, my work is pretty much split between, the fantasy side, obviously, and then, prospect scouting. Obviously, you can't do too much to the scouting part of it, so a little bit more geared towards the fantasy side right now, getting a lot of that work pumped out, and hopefully, like Jonathan said, maybe we'd have a AFL on steroids. That'd be awesome. If not, so hopefully we can get some games back next year. But yeah, a little bit more towards the fantasy side, since there's not really much scouting to do right now for live baseball, unfortunately.
Eric, thank you for joining us. You didn't have to fly out to Los Angeles for All-Star Weekend to be part of this conference. I really appreciate it. Emily, what's on tap for you?
Yeah, kind of like what Eric mentioned, by this point in the year, I probably would have been to about 5 or 6 different states, but still planted at home in Michigan. Thankfully, we've got some summer weather here, which is good. But for me, just working on a few odds and ends. I'm trying to come up with some fresh content ideas for The Athletic and also Baseball America. So we'll have some Tiger stuff coming, also some national stuff coming. So definitely keep an eye out for those things. And wanted to say, everybody, I know we can't all talk here tonight, but thanks everybody for joining us. This was really fun.
Yeah, we had over 40 participants tonight, which was really a great turnout. And I thank everyone for coming on. Thank you, Emily, for joining us. And Jonathan, when can we see you on MLB Network next, or be reading up on MLB.com?
Well, first, I want to know, Antonio, what any of us could possibly say in our closing remarks that would keep you from thanking us from joining the panel. I just, I'm watching the chat. Don't worry, I can multitask. In all seriousness, I think maybe I just said the thing that will keep Antonio from thanking us for joining the panel. MLB Network, I don't really know. They did just send me a handy-dandy new camera kit. Those of you who watched the draft, you got to see, well, pretty much the view you're seeing now. So we're going to do it. I'm told we'll be on. Normally right around now, we would have, we'd be preparing for the trade deadline and then putting out all our new lists, and then we'd have a new draft top 100 show on the network. That's not going to happen. We are going to have the new top 100 and new top 30s next week, and it's literally the list you see now, and we're just slotting in the draft guys. We're not moving guys around. So that's going to be the extent of it, which is not as exciting, but it did mean work for myself, Jim Callis, and Mike Rosenbaum. Those of you who know Mike, I don't know if you guys know Mike's work, but he just had a baby. So if you see him on Twitter, congratulate him. He has no idea what he's in for. But those are the big things coming up for me, and that's all I can tell you. The rest of it is, the same ongoing theme, a very large question mark. Any sneak peeks about our top 100? Spencer Torkelson will be on the top 100. That's all I'm telling you.
That's bold, Jonathan. That's real bold.
I know. I'm going out on a limb.
Well, I think he might even be somewhere in the top 20 range, right, Eric?
It wouldn't shock me. He should be right up there.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're a little over an hour. Jonathan and Emily, Eric, and all of the participants who came on tonight, my Prospects 1500 staff. This was really awesome, exceeded my expectations. Thank you. I'm probably going to do a little recap of the conference. Will be on our site. I am recording this, so I'm going to put this on our YouTube. Hopefully everyone's happy with how it comes out, and we'll get a lot of eyes on this, and we'll reach out to everyone soon on Twitter. Please stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your summer. And again, thanks all and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care, all.